Take a look at those nasty scars, princess. What happened? It tumbled down the stairs. The recruit's mocking voice rang out as he filmed the silent woman, ridiculing every mark etched into her scarred arms. She stood motionless, not saying a word while he degraded her in front of the entire squad. But her silence wasn't a sign of fear, it was something far more lethal. When the general appeared, fury turned his face pale. You just mocked a broken bar. What followed made even the toughest soldiers collapse to their knees. The recruit's phone slipped from his hand, smashing on the ground. What kind of call sign could make an entire military base tremble? Anna Dramanest. Comment below. Who do you think she really is? Nice bruises, princess. Didn't know Fort Blackwater started offering spa treatments. Came the next insult, cutting through the thick Tennessee air like a dull blade. Private Jake Morrison stepped back into formation, his voice just loud enough to ensure everyone within earshot caught his words. That was the goal. A humiliation was more powerful in public, and Jake had long sharpened his skills on finding just the right target. Sergeant Maya Stanley stood alone in the training field, her olive tank top drenched with sweat despite the early hour. Dust clung to her sun-kissed skin like a stubborn second layer. The morning sun exposed fresh evidence of hardship. Bruises in shades of deep purple and fading yellow patterned her arms, crawling up her collarbone like a cruel painting. These weren't the kind of marks left by a single fall. They told a deeper story, one written in the dark, where no one could witness the battle. Her hands bore raw, cracked knuckles. Her walk carried a slight limp, just enough to hint at past injuries that never fully healed. Yet despite every sign of pain, Maya stood tall, her spine rigid like a rifle barrel, her stance firm with a discipline that couldn't be taught. Only lived. Behind her, the Bravo squad fidgeted. Some snickered at Jake's remark, others looked on like spectators at a pit fight, waiting to see if the new arrival would break or retaliate. She was the only woman assigned to Bravo squad in over 2 years, a fact that had sparked endless rumors. No formal welcome, no explanation, just a sudden appearance under the vague title of Special Directive. In military language, that could mean anything: a disciplinary reassignment, undercover duty, or even witness protection. The mystery gave birth to whispers that slithered through the barracks. Some claimed she'd returned from a classified mission. Others said she was a desk jockey trying to prove herself. A few thought she was intelligence planted to watch them. But Maya said nothing, no clarifications, no denial. She let the rumors breed in the silence behind her. How many push-ups does it take to shatter a wrist, Sarge? Jake continued, his grin widening. Or did you trip over your own pride again? Maybe took a spill down some Pentagon stairs? The jab lingered like poison in the air. Nervous laughter followed, at the kind predators make while testing their prey. Jake knew how to make words cut. He knew ridicule inflicted wounds that fists never could. But Maya didn't flinch. She didn't respond when the snickering rippled through the squad. She didn't even blink when Jake's volume rose to pull more listeners in. Her eyes were fixed far away, locked on something beyond the training field, as if seeing a world the rest of them couldn't grasp. That stillness unnerved Jake more than any retaliation could have. He'd expected rage, tears, even a defensive comeback, something he could feed off. But she gave him nothing. Nobody really knew her, so they filled the gaps with assumptions, bending what little they saw into stories they could comprehend. The unknown scared them, and what they couldn't understand, they mocked. What they didn't realize was that Maya hadn't been dragged back to active duty. She'd signed up, not to prove herself, not for redemption. She had debts only she understood, burdens that couldn't be carried by anyone else. From a quiet hill beyond the field, General Victor Sterling watched, his hands clasped behind his back, face unreadable, but his pale blue eyes sharp and steady. He had seen the way the others looked at her, and the same way they always looked at those who didn't fit their mold. But Sterling knew better. He'd known the moment Maya stepped off the dusty Humvee this wouldn't be easy. Maya never chased recognition. She never wanted to stand out. But no matter where she went, history trailed behind her like a shadow. Still, the general didn't step in, not yet. Some lessons had to unfold naturally. Character couldn't be forced, and had to be revealed. Earned through fire, proven through adversity. And Maya Stanley had been through more fire than any of them could imagine. She stood there, silent under the rising Tennessee heat, the fading bruises on her neck glowing under the sun. A pale scar traced beneath her eye, a razor-thin, perfectly etched, almost invisible in the light. A mark of something done with precision, a broken bar and intent. The scar beneath her left eye was so precisely cut, it looked almost surgical, the kind of detail that could unlock so many questions if anyone had dared to ask them. But Maya didn't waste words defending herself against Jake's verbal abuse. She didn't break eye contact with whatever distant image held her gaze, because Maya Stanley had learned something most of them hadn't in their easy, predictable lives. Respect earned and silence always outlasted praise earned through noise. She stood like someone who had walked through fire and come back carrying others who couldn't make it alone. A few soldiers in the squad were already making quiet bets. Had she returned whole? Or was she still trapped inside whatever nightmare had carved those marks into her skin? But her stillness wasn't fear. It wasn't surrender. It was something far more primal, something ancient, that came from places where a single sound meant death, and silence kept you alive. Her shoulders stayed squared despite invisible weight. Her breathing remained even, unfazed by the emotional blows Jake had hurled her way. Her fingers didn't twitch, steady even in the face of memories his cruelty might have tried to dig up. The number 27 was inked in small, clean digits on her left wrist, and for a brief moment, it shimmered in the morning sun, just beneath her tank top's sleeve. A mark easy to miss unless you knew to look. It was a detail that could have explained everything, a broken bar if only someone had had the guts to ask. But bravery was rare that morning in Bravo Squad. They preferred the safety of speculation, the ease of prejudice, and the comfort of not knowing the truth. Jake Morrison, however, was growing more agitated with every second Maya stayed silent. He'd planned to rattle her, to provoke a crack in her composure that would validate his taunts and amuse his peers. Instead, he found himself face to face with a woman as unmoving as a mountain, as unreadable as a desert, and as quietly threatening as still water. Something in her unwavering calm made him feel small, exposed, as though he was the one under judgment now. What was she hiding behind those scars? Type scars in the comments if you think Mia's silence means something deadly lies beneath it. The next morning brought no relief from Jake Morrison's campaign of humiliation. In fact, Maya's refusal to react had only poured fuel on his obsession to break her. As the unit gathered for morning drills, Jake made his next move with the practiced precision of a predator who knew where his prey was vulnerable. He held a water bottle in one hand, pretending it was just for the workout, but his intent became obvious when he accidentally stumbled near Maya's gear. "Oh no, look at me, clumsy as ever," he said with fake remorse, as the water spilled across her equipment, drenching her backpack and soaking the neatly folded spare uniform she laid out for inspection. "Guess that makes us both klutzes. Huh, princess?" he added, voice dripping with mock innocence, undercut by real venom, the kind of tone bullies across history had mastered. The water turned the dust on her gear into sticky mud, making a mess that would take hours to clean. A few soldiers chuckled, appreciating the drama in Jake's newest prank. But Maya didn't flinch. She didn't complain. She didn't say a word. With calm precision, she moved her soaked gear aside, efficient, methodical, and utterly unfazed. During the exercises, Jake escalated his interference. He kept obstructing her progress, pretending every move was a coincidence. "Make sure you get a good angle of those battle scars, princess," he muttered, pulling out his phone and filming as she tackled the obstacle course and his own disruptions, making each movement harder. "This'll go viral," he added, angling his phone to zoom in on her face, hunting for any sign of frustration he could exploit later. The rest of the squad watched with mixed reactions. Some laughed along, others shifted awkwardly, unsure when teasing had turned into cruelty. But Maya's reaction remained unchanged, confusing Jake even further. Her eyes didn't show anger or pain. They reflected a kind of trained discipline, the kind built in places Jake Morrison had never been and would never survive. As the drills went on, her performance only sharpened. Every step, every motion was exact, her form perfect. Even Jake's constant interference couldn't throw her off rhythm. Some of the soldiers started to notice her technique wasn't just good, it was exceptional. Muscle memory like that didn't come from a weekend training camp. It came from years of combat-honed experience. When the session ended and the soldiers scattered for a break, Maya quietly returned to her modest barracks room. She stood alone before the small mirror mounted on the wall, the fluorescent light overhead catching every fresh bruise and old scar on her body. She slowly raised a hand to the thin scar beneath her left eye, at the one that looked almost surgical in its precision, the one nobody ever asked about. From the small bedside table, Maya picked up a set of dog tags, each etched with a name. 26 names. Names that would mean nothing to anyone else, but to Maya Stanley. Each one carried the weight of a world. She hadn't accepted this assignment to redeem herself, nor to prove anything to others. She had chosen this path because there was unfinished buzziness, a debt not measured in money, but in duty. Service was the only way she knew how to pay it back. Beside the tags, a faded photograph showed 26 young faces, all in uniform, all smiling with the optimism of youth and the certainty of purpose. They had once trusted her, believed in her leadership, counted on her to get them home. But fate had betrayed them, and though no one blamed her, the burden of that failure had etched itself into her soul, just as the scars had marked her skin. Elsewhere in the barracks, quiet voices carried truths that could have changed everything if only Maya had heard them. 2 seasoned soldiers, men who had seen their share of deployments and had developed a sixth sense for reading between the lines, sat in hushed conversation during their break. "Don't mess with her," warned Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, his tone low but firm. His eyes held the shadow of memories that never faded. "You remember that ghost lineup? The one that went sideways 4 years ago? The one where she was the only one who came back?" murmured Staff Sergeant Williams, his voice barely above a whisper. "Command said she needed special handling, something about mental evaluations, fitness reviews, and a broken bar special directives." The 2 veterans exchanged a glance, the kind that didn't require words, a shared understanding of things they weren't allowed to say aloud. "That name they whisper sometime as a widow." 27A Rodriguez added. "Heard it come up in top-level meetings, legends wrapped in classified reports. Stories passed around in Anadrama's night shifts like ghost tales with just enough truth to unsettle the listener." Meanwhile, Jake Morrison's frustration was reaching its limit. His plan to mentally break Maya had failed at every turn. Her silence, her composure, it all chipped away at his confidence. When people don't know the truth, he sneered to his closest friends, they get brave. But his own boldness was turning desperate. His taunts became sharper, his tactics less subtle. During one intense training session, he tried again. "Nice scar collection," he barked. "Each one got a story? Or are you just that clumsy?" Maya didn't answer. She didn't even look at him, but her jaw tensed. Her hands, folded calmly behind her back, tightened slightly, just enough for someone watching closely to notice. It was enough for Jake. To him, it meant she was cracking. It fed his obsession to push harder, dig deeper, and finally expose whatever secrets she carried. He was beginning to realize there was more to Maya Stanley than the broken soldier he had imagined. But pride wouldn't let him walk away. Instead, he doubled down, convinced that all he needed was one more confrontation to bring her down. Around the base, the mystery of Maya was growing. More soldiers started noticing things that didn't line up with their assumptions. A senior combat instructor avoided eye contact with Hira, not out of disrespect, but because he respected her too much to draw attention. He recognized something in Hira, something others weren't ready to understand. Her gait still carried a slight limp, suggesting past injuries. But when it came to combat drills, her movements were fluid and razor-sharp, like someone who had danced with death before and lived to remember every step. The 27 tattoo on her wrist became a point of curiosity. At first, soldiers had dismissed it. Now, they whispered, was it a code, a tribute, a warning? Whatever it was, Maya gave no answers. No explanations. No acknowledgement. She remained as silent, as unreadable, and as unshakable as she had been the day she arrived. Jake Morrison, however, was ready to raise the stakes. He had crafted what he believed would be his ultimate move via the final humiliation. A moment so public, so devastating, that Maya would finally reveal the vulnerability he was certain she was hiding. "Tomorrow," he declared to his inner circle, we find out what our war hero is really made of." He said it with the confidence of someone who believed he held every advantage. "She's hidden behind that silent act long enough. Time to see if there's anything underneath that mystery." That night, Jake prepared meticulously. He set up his phone for a live streaming. He enlisted other soldiers to watch, to film, to witness. "This is going to blow up," he said. "Viral level content, total exposure, Anadrama-nest style." He was already dreaming of the fame, the views, the headlines. All he had to do now was wait for tomorrow. He was finally going to expose here, show everyone what happens when someone pretends to be a soldier among warriors. Jake Morrison's arrogance was unshakable, and his blindness to the truth about Maya Stanley was complete. That night, Maya sat alone in her barracks room, holding the photograph that had haunted her dreams for 4 long years. She gently traced each face with her finger, 26 young lives frozen in time. Each one had a name, a voice, a memory, and a final moment only Maya remembered. "They deserved better than what they got," she whispered into the silence, her voice weighed down with the guilt of survival, something no amount of time or therapy could ever erase. The eyes in the photograph stared back with a quiet understanding, the kind only known by those who had given everything for something greater than themselves. And as the sun rose on Fort Blackwater, the stage was set for a reckoning, a one that none of them were truly prepared to face. Jake's inflated confidence was about to crash into a reality that would unravel everything he thought he knew about strength, about sacrifice, and about the soul of true service. Maya Stanley's silence was on the verge of being shattered by forces outside her control. And what would be revealed wouldn't just change how Bravo Squad saw her, it would forever alter their idea of what it means to wear the uniform. What really happened to those 26 soldiers in that photo? At Anadrama-nest, we dig deep into the military's darkest truths. Type Widow if you think you understand the meaning behind Widow 27. By morning, the Tennessee sun was climbing high over Fort Blackwater as Jake Morrison launched what he believed would be Maya Stanley's breaking point. He'd spent the night rallying his followers, positioning them around the training field, and setting up phones to record from every angle, ready to capture what he believed would be the ultimate psychological takedown. "Let's see if our silent princess can handle a real military challenge," Jake shouted, his voice booming for all to hear. He stood with the self-assurance of a man convinced the battle was already won. He designed a brutal physical challenge, made to look like routine training, but in reality, it was rigged to overwhelm Maya, and the cameras were rolling, ready to immortalize every second. "Come on, Sarge," he sneered with theatrical encouragement. "Tell us what those scars taught you. I bet each one's got a motivational backstory." Soldiers looked awesome, laughing along, others beginning to shift uncomfortably as the cruelty escalated into something darker. At the center of it all stood Maya Stanley, unmoved. She stood like stone, her posture unflinching in the face of calculated torment. She had already lived through horrors that would shatter the average soldier. Jake's attempts at intimidation didn't even register. Her eyes stared far beyond the field, into a space none of them could follow, somewhere in the past where pain and memory blurred, where Jake's ego-driven drama became nothing more than background noise. Jake, however, pushed harder. "Or maybe those scars are just from falling off your high horse?" he jabbed, voice rising with growing frustration. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or are you just another busted-up soldier playing tough?" He pointed at the marks on her arms, mocking them like they were signs of weakness instead of badges of survival. "Looks like you've lost more than you've won, princess. Maybe it's time you admit you don't belong here with real warriors." Then, Jake dropped the line he thought would land the final blow, or the name whispered in corners of the base, the one he didn't fully understand. "That's what they call you, right? Widow 27? He scoffed as he said it, dismissive and smug. "Sounds like something out of a comic book. What's next? You going to tell us you've got superpowers hiding under all that damaged goods?" The laughter that followed wasn't harsh, it was thin, uncertain. A few soldiers began to sense that this was no longer harmless hazing. Something had shifted. And for the first time since she arrived, Maya Stanley's armor cracked, not with fear, but with raw, restrained power. Her hands trembled just slightly with the effort it took to keep the dam from breaking. Her jaw clenched, her dark eyes flashing with something deep and unspoken that sent a ripple through the crowd. Even Jake's most loyal supporters took a step back. They saw it now. Beneath the calm surface was fire, a storm. Something was coming. The air changed, charged like lightning waiting to strike, like a storm building just beyond the horizon. Then, from the edge of the field, boots hit the dirt with a slow, thunderous rhythm. General Victor Sterling stepped forward from his post. Gone was the casual stance. His arms no longer rested behind his back. His hands were clenched into quiet fists at his sides. His face unreadable, but every soldier knew what that look meant. This was no longer a matter of discipline. This was personal. "You just ran your damn mouth at Widow 27's son," General Sterling said, his voice cutting across the field like gravel sliding over steel. Each word landed with precision, calculated and full of weight, causing a ripple of unease to spread through the ranks as nervous glances were exchanged among the soldiers. Jake Morrison's cocky grin faltered for the first time, slipping into a look of uncertain confusion. "Widow a broken bar what?" he snapped, his voice tinged with irritation, a defensive, confused, and now, undeniably off balance. He was beginning to realize that the carefully choreographed spectacle he had orchestrated might be unraveling before his eyes. General Sterling's ice blue eyes locked onto Jake with unblinking intensity, like the barrel of a weapon fixed on target. His voice, when he spoke again, was low, almost quiet, but somehow far more dangerous than any shouted command. "You don't need to understand what it means," he said slowly, each syllable sharpened to a knife's edge. "But you damn well better remember it." In that moment, General Sterling's presence seemed to stretch across the entire training field. It was no longer just authority, it was dominance. The kind forged in blood and fire, the kind that silenced even the wind. Behind Maya, one of the older instructors instinctively came to attention, not because protocol required it, but because something in his bone, as a something forged from combat and brotherhood, it told him that he was in the presence of someone who had earned this moment. "Call sign broken bar Widow 27, the general said. The words dropped into the still morning air like stones into a calm lake, sending invisible shockwaves through the crowd. Everything stopped. The snickers, the mockery, the smug, whispered jabs that had defined Jake's crusade. Even the Tennessee breeze seemed to pause, as if nature itself understood the gravity of what had been revealed. What had once been a mere training field was now heavy with tension, crackling like the air just before a storm. Each soldier stood a little straighter, as though subconsciously bracing for the fallout of something far larger than themselves. Widow 27, a broken bar. The name stirred half-forgotten memories and late-night barrack rumors, the kind of stories passed around during graveyard shifts of classified missions gone wrong, of soldiers who didn't make it home, a broken bar, and of one who did. Jake Morrison's face shifted again, this time fully abandoning arrogance for something much closer to dread. His confidence drained away as recognition settled into his expression like a slow-moving shadow. "No, a broken bar, no way," he muttered, barely louder than a breath, his pulse pounding in his ears. His phone slipped from his trembling fingers, landing on the packed dirt with a crack, the screen shattering just like the illusion he had clung to. Across the field, a younger recruit let out a shaky breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "No, why a broken bar?" he whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. Another soldier's expression changed from confusion to realization, piecing together rumors and fragments of whispered truth that had drifted through base halls like smoke. They remembered now hearing Widow 27's name in briefings, mentioned in hushed tones. A soldier who had disappeared off comms for 5 days only to reappear dragging wounded teammates through enemy fire, refusing to leave even one behind. "I thought that was just a myth," one soldier murmured to another, his voice edged with awe. "Some kind of legend." "Note a broken bar her." He gestured toward the quiet woman who still stood in the dust, her collar crusted with dried blood, her hair messy with sweat and grit. The contrast was staggering. The myth they had pictured in their minds, the hardened warrior from whispered stories, was standing right there, in front of them, not in a textbook, not in a file, but real, flesh and bone, bruised, battered, a broken bar but unbroken. Widow 27 wasn't just a name, she was the name, the kind they referenced in after-action reports. The one you mention only when talking about the worst-case scenario, so when survival was a miracle. She wasn't just respected, she was legendary, and none of them had been smart enough to recognize it. Her scars weren't signs of defeat, they were testimonies. Standing just feet from Jake, General Sterling gave him another cold, silent evaluation like a seasoned predator studying a clumsy threat. "You don't need to understand what it means," he repeated again, his voice low and final, "but you'd better damn well remember it." Behind Maya, the older instructor held firm in his stance at attention, not because of orders, but out of reverence. Respect, after all, isn't given, it's earned. And Maya Stanley had earned hers in ways few could comprehend. For the first time since her arrival at Fort Blackwater, Maya was no longer standing alone. The shift was small but undeniable. Something in the air had changed, and this time, it was in her favor. A ripple passed through the formation, a knot of discomfort, but of profound realization. The silence around Maya was no longer the awkward hush of exclusion, it had become something sacred. It was the silence that follows when soldiers stand in the presence of someone who has stared down death and returned changes, stronger, quieter, but never broken. Jake Morrison had just watched his entire world collapse. What he thought was a simple opportunity to tear down a damaged recruit had turned into a live broadcast of his own disgrace. He hadn't been mocking a weakling, he had targeted a war legend whose silence wasn't shame, but strength. All the cameras he had so smugly positioned to record Maya's humiliation now bore witness to his own ignorance. His name wouldn't be remembered as the victor, it would be etched into Anadromnest's archives as a cautionary tale, the man who tried to break someone unbreakable. As the sun rose higher over Fort Blackwater, the reality of what they had just witnessed began to settle on every soldier present. General Sterling stepped forward again, and the energy shifted. His next words would unearth the truth of Maya Stanley's scars, and why the callsign Widow 27 was spoken with such reverence in corridors most soldiers never walked. What really happened to Maya in Operation Ghost Line? If you think you know, type Ghost in the comments on Anadromnest, because the truth might be darker than you imagined. General Victor Sterling's face, lined with the memories of battle, seemed even more weathered under the weight of what he was about to reveal. His voice was calm, dangerously so, the kind of calm that precedes revelations powerful enough to change people forever. "Ever heard of Operation Ghost Line?" he asked, his voice slicing clean through the humid morning air. Jake Morrison visibly stiffened. His humiliation wasn't over, it had only just begun. This wasn't just about a name or a tattoo, it was about Historia and who had survived it. The silence stretched across the training field as the soldiers leaned in. Sterling's words came measured, heavy with truth. 4 years ago, a 7-person recon team was sent into enemy territory, mountain region, cold, remote. Even in the middle of summer, temperatures dropped below freezing, the kind of place where the wind can tear through your gear like it's made of paper. The general didn't need to embellish anything, his tone alone made them all feel the chill of that place. They were sent to verify intel about a weapons cache fueling insurgents across the valley, he continued, pausing, and not for drama, but because remembering still hurt. A mission that should have taken 2 days turned into 8 days of hell. Sterling's voice deepened, each word charged with the weight of classified briefings and survivor interviews. Not because of equipment failure, not because of bad planning, but because the enemy was more prepared than we were. And sometimes a broken bar, there's no training in the world that can prepare you for what happens next. A few of the younger recruits shifted uncomfortably, beginning to realize they were hearing more than just a war story. This was a reckoning. They were ambushed on day 2, Sterling said, his voice harder now. Tukia instantly shot before they even knew they were in a kill zone. Professional snipers, military-grade precision. It wasn't a fight. It was slaughter. The breeze shifted slightly, carrying the dry scent of dust and sun-scorched soil across the field. But no one moved. One more soldier bled out before sunrise. The general continued. Took a round to the femoral artery. Couldn't stop the bleeding with the kit they had. Died calling for his mother while his teammates did everything they could. The weight of those words settled over the soldiers like lead. They could feel it now. The cost, the sacrifice. One soldier disappeared, never found, maybe dead, maybe captured, maybe still up there in that cursed range. His family still prays for answers, Sterling's jaw tightened. These weren't just soldiers to him. These were names, faces, letters sent home that didn't come from the hand that wrote them, that left 3 alive, surrounded, no support. 8 days of survival and terrain that breaks even professional climbers. He turned slightly, his gaze falling once more on Maya Stanley, still standing motionless at the center of the formation, her face blank, her breath steady, but the air around her pulsed with memory. One of them had shrapnel lodged near his heart. Every breath was agony. He couldn't be moved fast, couldn't be left behind. The general's voice dropped lower. This wasn't a briefing anymore, it was testimony. Maya carried him, for 6 miles, across enemy territory. While under fire, the weight of that single sentence knocked the air out of the unit. That was Widow 27, the woman they mocked, the woman they didn't understand, and now a broken bar they did. Every step Maya took during that nightmare mission was a gamble. The wounded soldier she dragged behind her was fading fast. To every movement risked rupturing something inside him. He couldn't walk, couldn't even carry his own gear. Just staying conscious required more effort than most people expend in a week. And the radio operator, knocked unconscious during the ambush, in and out for days. No coordination with base, no communication, no rescue mission inbound. And then there was Maya Stanley. General Sterling's voice shifted to gravel softened by reverence. She took a bullet through the leg during the first contact, 2 broken ribs from the blast. No proper medical gear, no morphine, nothing but a basic kit you'd find in a civilian home. And 12 miles of snow-covered hell between her and survival. The assembled soldiers at Fort Blackwater could barely process what they were hearing. Sterling wasn't describing hardship, he was describing the impossible. She carried the radio operator on her back. The general continued, built a stretcher from destroyed gear and backpack straps to drag the wounded team member, all while bleeding herself, all while half her body screamed with every step. And she never stopped. No air support, no backup, no miracle rescues, just a brutal trek across enemy-controlled mountains with 2 dying men depending solely on her will to survive. That's what separated Maya from the rest. It was the kind of story you'd expect to hear whispered late at night, around mess tables, or passed down between deployments, and not told in daylight, not unfolding on anadrama nests with the world watching. While Sterling spoke, Maya's eyes weren't on the general. They weren't even on the other soldiers. Her mind was far from Fort Blackwater, far from Jake Morrison's staged humiliation. She was back on that mountainside. There was no audience then, just the sound of her boots crunching snow soaked with blood, her breath growing thinner, her body threatening to quit. She could still hear the radio operator's voice, barely conscious. "If I pass out a broken bar, don't stop, just keep walking." And she did. General Sterling's voice sliced through her memory like a cold wind, pulling every idea including Maya back to the present. She crawled the last 300 yards, both men on her back, because standing wasn't physically possible anymore. The silence across the training field was suffocating. Not a single soldier moved, no one even shifted their weight. "She brought them home," Sterling said quietly, "because that's what real soldiers do." His voice grew sharper, more pointed, as his gaze swept the formation. "You think she came back here looking for praise, glory, recognition?" Nobody answered. They knew better now. She came back because she remembers what happens when recruits aren't trained properly, when they treat war like a movie, when they think this is all some kind of adventure. Sterling's voice now carried a mixture of disbelief and awe. "After all that a broken bar, she asked for the hardest job we have, to train you, the next generation, the ones who think they know what it means to wear a uniform." There it was, the truth. This wasn't about some scarred veteran clinging to relevance. This was about legacy, responsibility. A hero who chose to return. Maya hadn't come back with speeches or medals. She came back with a kind of truth written into her skin. Every scar a story, every injury a warning, a lesson. Her silence, it wasn't emptiness, it was control, it was focus, it was earned. Sterling didn't need to say it outright, but every soldier understood. Maya Stanley wasn't just a survivor, she was a living standard, and they had all failed to recognize it. Jake Morrison stood like a man who had been struck repeatedly but only now realized he was bleeding. His smirk had died, the cocky posture was gone, even the boldest among his little circle looked away in shame. You all looked at her and saw someone broken, Sterling said. But the truth is a broken bar. You were looking at someone rebuilt, stronger than before. Quiet, and not because she had nothing to say but because she'd already done what most of you couldn't imagine surviving. And that silence that once surrounded Maya, it had changed. Now it was respect, not forced by command, but earned, through blood, through fire, through a hell most of them would only ever hear about on a drama nest. And from that moment on, every soldier at Fort Blackwater knew exactly who Maya Stanley was. She was widow 27, and she had never stopped walking. That cruel Latra broken bar, the smug dismissal of broken bar, all of it had been aimed at a woman whose courage had redefined what it meant to wear a uniform. Maya Stanley wasn't just another soldier, she was number 27, the survivor who carried the memories and the scars of 26 fallen comrades. She didn't lead through orders or medals. She led by sacrifice, by refusing to let even one name on that dog tag set become just another forgotten casualty. Sometimes leadership doesn't come with stripes or speeches, General Sterling said, his voice now soft but unwavering. Sometimes as a broken bar it looks like a woman with bruised arms, a clenched jaw, a broken bar and fire in her silence. Someone who could have walked away, but chose to come back. Those words would ring in every soldier's head long after that morning ended. But what about Jake Morrison? Would there be consequences for his cruelty? Anna Drama Nest reveals what happened next. Type justice if you believe Jake deserved what was coming. The revelation hung over Fort Blackwater like the dust after an explosion. Nothing looked different, but everything had changed. Jake Morrison walked off the training field with slumped shoulders, head down, his swagger erased. There were no words shouted at him, no jeers, no applause, just silence. But this silence was louder than any rebuke. It was the sound of realization, of shame. And it followed him like a shadow. Within hours, the fallout spread like wildfire. Jake's phony meant to broadcast Maya's downfall was now a permanent digital confession of his own ignorance, arrogance, and cruelty. Every soldier who had laughed with him earlier now took a careful step back, afraid that even association with him might tarnish their reputations. The videos he once hoped would go viral became the evidence of his disgrace. His reassignment orders were processed with unusual speed, and within days, he was gone. No goodbye ceremony, no farewell drinks, just a broken bar gone. Even at his next station, the whispers followed, "That's the guy who messed with widow 27. Every evaluation came stained by that reputation. His career effectively over. Meanwhile, Maya Stanley responded in the only way she knew how, with discipline and silence. No celebration, no retaliation, not even a comment. She simply continued her duties as she always had, with quiet dignity that no humiliation could shake. And in doing so, she delivered the most powerful lesson of all, that real leadership doesn't roar, it endures. In the days that followed, the very atmosphere of Fort Blackwater shifted. Soldiers who once mocked Maya now watched her with newfound respect. They studied her movements. They listened when she spoke, rarely, but always meaningfully. Suddenly, they understood that this wasn't just a woman running drills. This was a soldier who had lived what they only trained for. The same bruises and scars they once ridiculed had become symbols not of weakness, but of survival, of truth. Training became focused, intentional. Each drill charged with the awareness that it might one day be the difference between life and death. Later that evening, the mess hall buzzed as usual, clinking forks, murmured conversation, but the tone had changed. Gone was the laughter that once rang out too loud, too carelessly. In its place, restraint, respect, because now they knew broken bar that a true hero sat among them. At a table in the far corner, a still alone Maya Stanley ate her meal just as she had every other evening since arriving at Fort Blackwater. No one had joined her yet, but this time, it wasn't because they were avoiding her. This time, it was because they didn't feel worthy. Maya Stanley sat straight-backed, calm and composed, every movement precise, every bite measured. She looked like someone who had long since given up expecting company, a broken bar, and learned to live without it. But something was different now. The distance that once signaled rejection had quietly transformed into something else entirely: respect, the kind people give to those who have walked through hell, a broken bar, and come back standing. It began subtly, No grand gestures, no formal apologies, just the sound of soft footsteps across the mess hall floor, the gentle clink of trays, the quiet scraping of chairs. One young recruit sat down beside Hira, nervous, but steady, then another, and another. Soon, the once empty table held silent figures, eating alongside Maya, not out of pity or broken bar but recognition. No one spoke, no one tried to explain away their past mockery, no one dared apologize with words they knew would fall short. They just sat there, eating in silence, letting their presence speak for them. And then, quietly, one of them leaned forward and asked the question that had haunted them all. Why a broken bar widow 27? The air between them held still. Maya didn't look up, she didn't pause or hesitate, she simply answered, her voice as steady as stone. Because I buried 26, I'm number 27. The words dropped into the space like stones in a still pond, sending quiet ripples through every heart around the table. No one said a word after that, because there was nothing left to say. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't tense, it was sacred. They had heard something few ever would, a truth too heavy for speeches and too real for ceremony. That night, no one thanked her, no one clapped. They didn't need to. They showed up, they stayed, they listened, and for the first time since she'd returned to Fort Blackwater broken bar, Maya Stanley didn't eat alone. What would you do if you found out your biggest critic was actually a war hero? Type respect if this story changed how you view people with scars. The story of Maya Stanley and Jake Morrison spread through military circles like wildfire, becoming a quiet but powerful legend at Anadrama Nest. A story about the danger of judging by appearances, a broken bar, and the strength it takes to carry ghosts. Maya continued her work in unshaken, unchanged, but everything around her had transformed. Her professionalism now carried weight, her presence, once ignored, became magnetic. Recruits watched her with wide eyes, listened to her rare words like scripture, because they finally understood. This was no ordinary soldier. She had bled, carried, buried and returned, not for fame, not for glory, but to ensure no one else made the same mistakes. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison's fall was swift and absolute. His name became a quiet warning. His footage, once intended to shame Maya, became a digital monument to his own arrogance. Transferred, forgotten, unmourned. His military career effectively a broken bar over. But Maya, she didn't gloat. She didn't even speak of it. Her silence said more than any speech could. She had already proven that real strength doesn't seek revenge, it simply endures. And it drains the next generation with quiet fire. That mess hall, once full of careless noise, was now filled with quiet awe. They knew now, heroes don't always wear medals. Sometimes they sit alone in a broken bar until someone has the courage to sit beside them. At Anadrama Nest, we believe stories like this matter, because in a world that celebrates loud voices and shallow victories, Maya Stanley reminds us, real strength bleeds in silence, it trains without praise, and it teaches cowards what respect really means. The 26 names on her tags will never be forgotten. And Maya Stanley number 27A will carry their memory forward, a broken bar, one recruit at a time. If the story touched your heart, tap that like button. Help us bring more hidden heroes into the light. Want to support our mission at Anadrama Nest? Check the link in the description. And if you're still reading Thieves a Broken Bar, you're one of us now. Subscribe to Anadrama Nest and binge like your group chat depends on it.